Hey everybody, welcome into MLS Digest. We're here to preview week 33 of the MLS season, and we're really winding down now into the final month and a half or so before the playoffs start, and games are really starting to matter for positioning. And we've got a loaded slate coming up this Saturday, September 13th, with 15 matches and honestly a lot of really good matchups. And so we're going to get into all those matchups and everything you need to know as far as lineups, who's in and who's out, and predictions and some best bets if you're interested in that. So before we do that, please make sure to like the video down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And let's just get right into it. To start the slate off, it's Atlanta hosting the Crew. And although Atlanta isn't technically eliminated just yet, they're really on the cusp of being eliminated in the next 1 to 2 weeks, as the gap between them and the 8-9 spots right now held by NYC and Chicago really is just seems like too much to overcome. They would have to basically be perfect, and those two would have to basically get 1 or 2 points the rest of the way, which just isn't really practical. So despite all that money spent, it's just an unbelievably disappointing season from Atlanta to not even make the playoffs. And this team is still healthy. Like, the guys are still there, but they just haven't clicked all year. And they're really a wild card when it comes to this final month or so of the season as to how those performances will look, if there's any reason to trust this team, right? But the Crew on the other end, sitting in seventh, and the East playoff spots at the moment from like third through eighth or so are really, really tight. And every game is going to matter down this stretch. So it's about that closing time. And Abu Ali so far, since joining the Crew, since actually playing a game or two, you know, there's still those growing pains, and this team still is lacking, right? That killer instinct, that same level of just simply putting the ball in the net, scoring those goals. And that's why it's a little difficult to trust them in this spot here. You like the projection, you like the potential with Abu Ali there, but I think we still have to see a couple of weeks. I mean, they had a couple of tough opponents. New England can be stingy defensively. They lost to them at home, and then they drew 0-0 at New York, in a place that has not been easy whatsoever to play. I think New York still holds the most points at home for any team in MLS this season. So, and let's, also mention the fact that many of these teams have had 2 weeks off technically since last week. There were only 4 matches, so many teams, had the international break and just had off of their normal MLS schedule. So getting back into the swing of things, it could be a little bit rusty. And while I do favor the Crew here, it's just very difficult to really trust them from a betting perspective specifically. I think this game is just a wild card. It's really all on the Crew as far as their finishing goes. And Atlanta has just been a lost cause all season, whether that be home or away. So the Crew's lineup looks good here. I think they should get the 3 points, but I wouldn't be surprised if they disappoint and only, hold on for a draw, because still also Nagbe still been out dealing with injuries. And while this lineup looks good, it isn't at its full capacity, full strength, full capabilities. So I'm going to take Columbus to win 2-1, but, that's being hopeful. They need to show us that they can produce multiple goals game in, game out once again, like they have and did the past couple of seasons, if they want to actually contend for one of those top 4 playoff spots. Moving on, it's Charlotte hosting Miami, and Charlotte has been no doubt the hottest team in MLS over the last maybe 2 months or so, including even though they didn't get out of the Leagues Cup groups, in just pure MLS play, they've now gotten, I believe, 8 straight wins, yes, 8 straight wins, and 9 unbeaten, going back to that game against Orlando City where they actually were up 2-0 and then only got a draw out of that match. But regardless, despite a lot of defensive issues for the Charlotte team and losing Ajimang, they're sitting in third right now. And honestly, props to them, but I just don't think they are going to show this in the playoffs unless Pep Biel continues to unlock that extra level that he's shown. And right now he's been injured for basically about a month and a half, and it seems like leading up to this game that he's been getting in good fitness, that he's an option. But whether he starts or not immediately, I don't think he will. And Miami, though, sitting in sixth with 46 points, but you have to see those 10 games remaining, and that has been a key part of how they won last year's Supporter Shield and how they can contend, because they play in these so many competitions. They just made the Leagues Cup final, which, yes, they got outclassed by the Sounders in, but that's why they have these games in hand, and they can really creep up on you if other teams in the East aren't as clinical down the stretch, because Miami it's all about handling that business now. Everything else is behind them, and now they're focusing on getting into and earning one of those top 3 or so spots, because if they win those games remaining, they're going to be equal or better than most teams outside of maybe the Union as far as the point total goes at the moment. So their full sights are set on that, and I'm going to back Miami here. I know Luis Suarez is suspended for his spitting after the League Cup final. But this Miami team, regardless, is pretty healthy. Charlotte as well, like I said, missing Pep Biel from most likely coming off the bench. Toklamati was also dealing with a knock at the end of the following game, but it's been 2 weeks since then, so it's a bit of a question mark there. But I think Miami on the draw no bet here, going on the road to a leaky Charlotte team. Even though they are a good home team, one of the better home teams in the league, I just think Miami has their number, and you just don't see Miami losing too often. They've had the rest. International break is over, and I think at worst this is a push. So I'm going to take Miami on the value to probably a lot more towards the end of this end season stretch to just start handling business, no matter what the numbers or metrics may say. Next up, it's a really tasty battle in the East. Cincinnati hosts Nashville. These two teams only separated by 2 points, and coincidingly, 2 places in the standings. That's how tight it is. Philly above everyone, but besides that, it's very, very neck and neck. And, 3 points here goes such a long way towards securing top 4 or, just changing a bit of this positioning here. And honestly, this is a week in general where I'm not very high on many home teams, and that is just scary to think about in general, because MLS, like most leagues, right? I mean, home field advantage is a real thing, but MLS, home field advantage is certainly a big trend, and I just think these matchups themselves this week in general are just lending themselves towards a lot of drama, being that it is also towards the end of the season. Things are going to be very scrappy and passionate as these teams are fighting for playoff positioning. And yeah, but in this specific case, I just don't really like Cincinnati in the spot, because coming out of Leagues Cup, they've lost 3 out of their 4 matches, and those 3 losses were all at home, and they were all 1-0 losses. They were shut out at home in all 3 of those losses, and the one non-loss since Leagues Cup was Evander's random just having a vendetta against the Timbers, going to the Timbers where they lit up the Timbers in the first half and then almost actually choked that 3-0 lead. Yes, held on for the win, but this team just hasn't looked dangerous offensively, and Pat Noonan, despite them sitting in second, I think should be getting a little bit of flack for the tactical way that Cincinnati has been playing. I think just putting those players out there, those names out there, isn't enough on a base level. It's just something hasn't been clicking with this group all season long, because the attacking metrics just haven't been there. Evander has been the saving grace of this team. Yes, mostly against lower opposition, and that can get you by, but in these important matchups, we just saw them lose to Philly at home. This is another really good team in the East. And it's just one that I'm really interested in watching, but I can't really fully trust Nashville either because they've had a bit of some stinkers since Leagues Cup as well. They weren't in Leagues Cup, but I mean since MLS play got started, since after that, they've had a couple of stinkers on the road. Zimmerman has gotten back to health, but it just hasn't been fully there yet. And, you know, as well for Cincinnati, Celentano, Robinson, both out. Robinson was training individually, so he's probably not really ready yet. And that just weakens that defense. So I can once again see another road upset or, Nashville at least getting a point out of this. But it's going to be a scrappy game. And I don't fully just trust Nashville's defense on the road. But Cincinnati has burned me too many times to count recently. And yeah, it just on paper just doesn't seem like it's just something where like you have to wait to see if something's going to change. Insanity's doing the same thing over and over again, and that's what Cincinnati seems to be just rolling out there week by week now, trying to just grind it some way out, get a point or two here or there in these final games so that it can hold on to a top 4 spot. But it might end up hurting them in the end when they get maybe 4th, let's say, and then they're screwed for the rest of the playoffs. So I think this is a really intriguing match on paper, but I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Next up, it's DC hosting Orlando. DC is one of a couple teams already eliminated, and of course nothing to play for against Orlando, which is coming off a disappointing end to Leagues Cup after obviously a very good run, making the semifinals, but then lost to Miami after going up and then having potentially being able to go up multiple goals and then losing to the Galaxy on the road on a short turnaround in that 3rd place game. So a couple of weeks off since then, getting to regroup, but Muriel is going to be suspended for this one. Also, Araujo dealing with a lower back injury, so he's going to be truly just like a questionable tag, game time decision. A bit of an engine in that midfield. We'll see if Duncan McGuire gets a start because he's been basically benched for Muriel, although Muriel has had hot and cold streaks all season. He had a really good stretch, and recently it seems like he's been kind of bringing the team down as far as how this team lines up and taking away from some players' best positions. But DC United pretty much fully healthy. Benteke's been back. They're at home here. Aaron Herrera suspended, which is, yes, a bit of a concerning loss for this team as far as some attacking production, because he's one of those guys that swings in a bunch of crosses for Benteke to attack. But I think Orlando will be leading the line here no matter what. DC is just not a good team, not going to be holding many clean sheets. But I do think they have, some good chances to make this game a bit fun and competitive. And so I'm not going to get too cute with a both to score or anything like that with a total. I'm just going to go for here with the over 3 for the second best bet at plus 108. I think Orlando can get 3 themselves. But I think we saw last time it was 4-1 to Orlando early in the season. Not to be a head-to-head type of mention thing, but I think this game just has a lot of attacking potential. Orlando is going to bring it as we approach the final several games of the season. And DC as well has nothing to lose. Gets a bit of a home bump. And I just don't think Orlando will be able to contain Benteke, Pirani. I just think this one has kind of 3-1 or 2-2 written over it. And we see a good, fun game here with a lot of attacking potential. Next up, it's a cross-conference battle, but not much to talk about in this one. It's Montreal hosting St. Louis. Montreal is already eliminated. They've been, maybe not mathematically, but practically eliminated for quite some time now. St. Louis, I think, can basically be eliminated this week, even if they win. So, yeah, the gap is too far. 5 games left. They basically need to win in these last 5 games, plus a lot of help. And Montreal has just been a true wild card, and so this is one that on a very congested Saturday slate, I don't think this is one that you should be turning on if you're having trouble picking between some games. There's a couple of those on this slate, but a lot of the rest of the games are very compelling, I would say. So it's a it's a drastic kind of shift as far as how this slate is looking. So St. Louis dealing with a bunch of squad rotation. Tyker hasn't been available for some time now, and they couldn't get past 10 men Dallas for about, what was that, over an hour, and could not get that over the line. That just added to, basically put the nail in the coffin for any type of final attempt at making the play-in. So, yeah, calling a result here, virtually impossible. Not much to really expect or talk about for this one. An Eastern battle here in what is two teams which the playoff hopes are drastically slipping week by week. And, in about 2 games or so, it's basically going to be over for each of them, because the gap between these two and the Fire and NYC, who are occupying those final couple of play-in spots, is just too big. Most of the drama as far as these playoff positioning, I think, is going to be as far as who's already in these spots and just who's going to flip-flop, not kind of teams making it, really jumping in late and stealing people's spots in general in these playoffs. So New England has been slipping for some time now. Toronto, like I mentioned, I think just fantastic turnaround as far as the squad building goes to get Mihailovic, get rid of the Italians, get rid of those contracts, and they're kind of prepping for potential other moves in the off season. But it's just too late right now, and I see kind of a lower scoring game here. Both these teams, a draw just does neither of these teams good here. So I think you're going to see them kind of going for it, but also Campagna going to be out for this one once again. New England last week at the Fire got the scoreline. I didn't look it, but they got rolled by the Fire. It was 3-0. They got a late penalty to make it a 1-goal game. But yeah, neither of these teams have really been picking up wins recently to bolster their hopes. And so once again, it's one that is just not all that compelling to tune into, but I'm going to favor New England and Carles Hill to just have enough if there is a winner in this one. Moving on to just above those last two teams in a very, very interesting Eastern battle. The 2 play-in spots occupied by these 2 teams at the moment. The Fire picking up a big win against New England last week in that very short slate. NYC has had an extra week of rest, right, because they didn't play last week. They have to travel here. The Fire will be back at Soldier Field after a very successful, I would say, spell in the 3 or 4 games they played at SeatGeek. And Soldier Field specifically, they haven't really had all that much success this season, right? They've been a heavy away team, especially early in the season. They went on a great run of away wins. And Soldier Field here with the Bears, already playing a game and that being kind of suited towards them. Of course, they take priority. And the pitch conditions being what they were for that game, even for football, I think this just shapes up to be potentially a lower scoring game, despite the Fire's, of course, tendencies and how they would like to play. Because I just think that pitch is going to be abysmal, and the Fire just haven't shown to be trusted in that stadium, specifically in that environment. Like they just aren't getting the results. NYC on the other end is just kind of a pesty team. They hang around. Martinez has, of course, been lethal all season, and that can be scary. So I think this is a true toss-up. I think this is going to be a very close game, one that's decided by probably 1 goal, and I see it being a little bit lower scoring. And for the Fire, it's actually only Barroso out at the moment. And then you also have a couple of question marks on in that center back pairing as far as who's going to be with Jack Elliott. But for NYC, it's basically all the same as far as what that lineup should be expected to be. So, yeah, NYC, of course, hasn't been as great on the road as at home, but I think they've been respectable. So they can make a tough game for Chicago, and I think neither would really turn down a point in this situation. So I think, I'm calling that this one will be a kind of grindy, lower scoring game. I'm going to say a 1-0 win either way. We go on over to the West, where it's yet another Texas Derby, the second one in about a month between these two sides, Dallas and Austin. Dallas still hanging around in a sense, around those play-in spots, trying to creep in if they get a couple of good wins. But the clock is ticking against them. They did very well to hold on to a point when they were down to 10 men at St. Louis. Austin, meanwhile, coming back to win at Kansas City in the short week. Both these teams did play last week, so no extra rest. But Paez is basically out for the season for Dallas. And then for Austin, a lot of key players returning from international break. So that was an extra important win last week out with so many key players in the midfield and backline missing. And getting that, they're just efficient on their corner kicks. They get goals in kind of ugly ways, but they're sitting in sixth, so they're going to live and die by their kind of lower scoring, low percent chance kind of transitional type of game. And this was a 1-1 draw in Austin about a month ago, and I think Austin's going to carry on this form, which just means they're going to lose in this case when I say it, because Austin's been a team that's kind of been hard to read. Once again, they have a lot of one-goal games. The swings in their games are very dramatic. It's very hard for, obviously last week happened where they came back, but it's usually hasn't been the case where one team is coming back in an Austin game to take the 3 points. Like, that's the game script has been very straightforward from whenever the first goal is scored. And Uzuni's been in form. He just was with Albania on the international break. And, yeah, I think they're going to frustrate Dallas. Dallas has been terrible at home all season. A team that doesn't possess the ball a lot, but if they try to kind of get comfortable, it's only going to be because Austin is allowing them to be and make them kind of feel that false sense of security. And then they'll kind of hit them on the break is what I expect as far as how the game will pan out. But I'm not going to trust Austin to be overly clinical. And I just, if I am going to get involved in an Austin game, especially a derby like this, like which we did the last time they played, it would be an under, and that one hit then. But this is one I'm just staying away from. It's just one of those other sort of compelling matchups just because of the derby aspect. But this is kind of last chance saloon for Dallas. Next up, staying in the West, it's San Jose hosting LAFC. And, a bit of a discrepancy as far as the games remaining for these two teams. San Jose just hanging around, staying alive in that final play-in spot. Meanwhile, LAFC, due to other competitions, some rescheduling, they have extra games remaining. So their positioning at the moment is a bit of a facade as far as where they could be if they do pick up the points with these games in hand. So the big thing for LAFC is that, of course, they've lost a couple of key pieces to this back line. They're going to be out for the season. We thought that would really affect them, but it wasn't all that drastic. They were still picking up wins, some disappointing draws, but that was more of an attacking thing than a defensive shortcomings. But now Igor Jesus being out for the season in that defensive midfield, I think is going to be a key problem for this team as far as just, long term or big picture, playoff aspirations, MLS Cup aspirations. And, we're seeing that, last time out against Dallas, it was 1-1. They had the lead on the road, and then they gave up a goal. That's not something you really see under Steve Cherundolo. This team is very good at closing it down when they get the lead, but when you don't have the personnel out there to actually execute, it becomes obviously, of course, more difficult. And of course, your Reese is always good for a terrible mistake. So all that to say, in this third best bet, it's going to be a two-legger. In this game, I'm going to take both teams to score. I'm going to keep it relatively simple. I think goals in this one are, shouldn't be at a premium. I think it should be an entertaining game. And I think neither is really good enough to hold out the other. LAFC, of course, Martinez is dealing with a bit of a knock, but you still have Ordaz Boanga's son. He scored in both games in international break for South Korea. And meanwhile, the Quakes, of course, we all know about their attacking metrics, especially at home. It's usually goal fest. It's usually both the scores, and it's at a really good price to play in a two-legger. So I think this is one where both teams will trade blows. Both can honestly even get two, and that is kind of where the total is leaning, around over 3. But yeah, San Jose basically full strength at the moment. Both teams have had that extra rest since neither played in that limited slate last week. And so that's where kind of my head's at with this one. I think this is going to be an entertaining game in San Jose. San Jose with a bit more pressure to kind of get results, because at home it's been kind of hard to come by. I know they just beat Vancouver, but that was a very taxing effort against 10 men where they lost the lead in extra time and then won it once again. So for here, I'm just going to take both the score. I'm going to attack the fact that both defenses are just not very strong at the moment. Moving on to Seattle hosting the Galaxy, and this has been a bit of a staple matchup the past month or so, and Seattle has absolutely owned the Galaxy, and I'm going to say that it won't be third time the charm for the Galaxy. I think Seattle's going to continue this fantastic form, and I'm going to take them on the money line against the Galaxy to close out this third best bet, with that San Jose LAFC both to score included at plus 106. Coming off that Leagues Cup victory, Seattle is just, of course, very, very energetic. And of course, they seem to always close out these seasons with a bunch of home games, and that is their kind of bread and butter, is really locking it down at home. They're one of the league's best defensive teams in general, and they've just been a team possessed as far as just watching them play. They are very in tune and sync, and the injuries haven't really beaten them down too much. Ruznak, who is dealing with an injury, Schmetzer said he's 100% ready to go. Only really De La Vega dealing with a bit of a potential knock in his knee and could be held out, but this lineup is still too strong, and with Peck being suspended, that of course really leaves the Galaxy in a bad state. Paintsel coming back from international break. Of course, the Galaxy played in last week's limited slate. They came back with a very late equalizing goal at Houston. But yeah, the season is over for the Galaxy as far as their playoff chances. Nascimento also out. Marco Reus also out. And it just seems like a bit of a bit of load management and just accepting, that this season is over for the Galaxy, even if they want to frame it as these minor knocks and they're going to be cautious. It's the same reason they're not going to bring Ricky Puig back, because they're looking ahead to next season. They're not going to overly, expend themselves over these final couple of games. Yeah, they want to be competitive, but they're going to give a bit of minutes to some of these younger academy players and such, and the cohesion is just not going to be there. And honestly, it hasn't really been there with the full squad all that much. Anyway, so I just don't see the Galaxy keeping this competitive. Going to Seattle is already hard in general, and the only reason that I could see this being a bit of a chalky game is because of that bit of an extended break, a bit of a Leagues Cup hangover. But Seattle is, used to winning trophies. And Schmetzer, I think, will have them back in that right mindset to attack this game and continue to do what has been right against the Galaxy. And right now they're sitting in fourth. They have an extra game or two remaining on everyone else, it looks like, and they're trying to attack one of those top spots in the West, and solidify a home playoff spot, because as you saw in that Leagues Cup final, is just a place that they love to play and they can really lock it down. Next up, it's the Rapids hosting the Dynamo, a very important game for playoff positioning, 8th versus 10th in the West, and only 3 points separating these two. And yet again, the Dynamo last week showed against a very rotated Galaxy that you just simply cannot trust them as far as what your expectation is for them. They completely perform against it. Like, it's actually hilarious at this point how many times it happens without fail. So here they're going to be underdogs on the road to Colorado, but Colorado also a bit untrustworthy. They lost, of course, Mihailovic. They seem to be going all in on Paxton Aronson, but I think the jury's still out as to, what his true, level of contribution and if he can dominate this league at such a young age. And, it's a playoff push at the moment, so every point matters. I think it's going to be a cagey game, but I think the Rapids should still be favored. They have, Navajo, Yappy with a bit of a knock, so we'll see if he can start. But yeah, this is one that, on paper, because of the positioning at the moment, is intriguing, but I just don't think there's going to be too many. I don't think it'll be too entertaining a game. I just really am completely out on Houston, and I just don't think they're going to have enough to sneak into the playoffs over the Rapids and San Jose, who are currently holding the spots that they want to occupy. Moving on, it's RSL hosting Kansas City, and neither of these teams in playoff spots at the moment, but RSL looking the more likelier of just sneaking in if they handled their own business, and they have a couple of extra games in hand. So if they were to win that, they'd basically be in 9th or so at the moment. And they have a great chance here against KC, who just seems to be reeling, although being a bit, just more competitive this season as far as, under the interim coach. Last week seemed like a killer blow where they were against a really rotated Austin squad and then just couldn't even leave with a draw. And so 27 points, 5 games remaining. It's looking really, really unlikely. Now they have to travel to altitude here. RSL has had the extra rest, and they've had several games now with these 2 new striker signings implemented. Diego Luna is going to be playing. I think this could be a serious push for RSL to make a case for getting in over one of the Rapids, San Jose, or Austin or something like that. Or not Austin, whoever's in 7th at the moment. Because it could get a little bit tight just because of those games remaining. Now, if they were on 5 games remaining, that'd be another case. But this is a favorable matchup. This is one where they can make up ground in, and I think it's certainly possible. So full strength RSL, Diego Luna leading the way. I think they're not going to go down without at least a fight and in terms of handling their own games, and we'll see what happens around them. But I do think they win this one sort of comfortably, even though Kansas City has been a little bit difficult to break down on the road. I just think Kansas City, I think they're just going to not sit down and die, but just I think the chances are fading, and that spirit at the same time, that same cohesiveness and being just super difficult in a low block or defensively to break down is just kind of fading, as their chances for the playoffs will in these last couple of games. Moving on, it's Vancouver hosting the Union, and this is, of course, one of the games of the weekend with 2 really good teams in their respective conferences. Philly at the moment, Supporters Shield contenders, alongside San Diego, who's in first in the West. And Vancouver, in the first half of the season was looking like runaway Supporters Shield winners, but they've really dropped off a level. And that's been due to injuries, players leaving. Vite, of course, the big one. And Ryan Gault still hasn't returned. He's been out for essentially this whole season, which has been a real pain for this Whitecap side as far as what this upside and true ceiling can be. Of course, they signed Mueller. It's been a couple of games now, and they beat St. Louis last time out, but that was very, very fairly, to say, robbery as far as that final penalty being given. So I think their defense has been leaky. Of course, Veselinovic has been out and out for the season now. Adekugbe as well out for the season. And so I don't know. I don't know if I see this team being a true contender, as far as MLS Cup goes. But the West is pretty weak. So if they were to run into like Sounders, San Diego, Minnesota, like those other top four, I don't know if I take them in that case, but they can certainly progress past the first round or maybe make a conference final. But regardless of that big picture here, Brian White as well out for this game. That's a big loss. Daniel Rios is going to be starting. White has been training a little bit, but making the bench probably at a maximum. And then, it's not the same lineup. It just doesn't have the same juice that they had. And this high tempo possession style hasn't really been the possession against the weaker teams, like that St. Louis game at home, that Dynamo game at home. They aren't able to close out teams. Obviously, like I said, yes, they beat St. Louis, but it wasn't because of it just on the eye test, like it's just not happening. The same sequences are not happening. They're not actually penetrating defenses when they need to, and they're not being convincing enough. So even though they're at home here, even though the Union have to travel basically one of the furthest routes for an away match in MLS, Union are full strength here outside of Andre Blake. Maybe he could potentially return, but it seems like it's going to be Rickett still in net. But that's really the only case for this Union team. And the Union have been hot. They just beat Cincinnati on the road a couple weeks back, of course. And I'm going to take them to, pull off the upset here. I'm not really sure fully why the odds are why they are. I mean, I kind of get it, but like, I just think the Union are the better team. I know they're going to be on the road here, but for this fourth best bet, I'm going to take the Union draw no bet at plus 130 to get that push protection. And it's just great value for right now, one of, if not the best team in the league, just consistently handling business and also defensively very sound with defensive wingbacks that can really get active in the game. So I just think it's going to be the levels will be shown here in a sense. And the Whitecaps are also just hurting as far as this lineup goes. So it's not going to be a true test, I think, as far as which team is better. And the Union right now are just stronger and healthier. So I'm going to take them on the draw no bet. And I just, at a worst case scenario, this is a push, but I do like them to win. And that plus 200 or whatever it is looking really, really tasty as well on the money line. Next up, it's the Timbers hosting the Red Bulls in a cross-conference matchup late night on Saturday. Both these teams in really close battles in terms of making the playoffs. Red Bulls sitting just outside the East play-in, with Chicago overtaking them last week when the Red Bulls didn't even play. And so now the pressure is, just on them in a sense. But outside of home, points have been pretty hard to come by on the road. So the Timbers have been pretty consistent at home all year, but at the moment they're in a bit of a transitional phase as far as getting these players that they sign implemented to this lineup and finding the right combination. But at the same time, Neville hasn't been very shy about just throwing these players into the fire together and giving them starts. So we've seen a couple of games of Valde. Carballo, though, getting injured. He was the former Red Bulls player last year when they made the Cup final. But he's got injured and out for the year, ACL, I believe. So that's I would say a big knock, but I mean, just you basically have to act like they didn't even sign him. It's not like they lost all that much. So kind of life goes on as normal, maybe a bit less of a head scratcher as far as, making lineup decisions, which could relieve some pressure on Neville. But I think the Red Bulls can keep this game competitive. They have a midfield that is very, very active, can make you force mistakes, and just from their pressure and pressing. But yeah, it's one that's kind of hard to call in my opinion. I think it could have goals, but I think the Timbers will have enough to win this one by. I wouldn't be surprised if they won this one by multiple goals. To close out the slate, it's 1 versus 2 in the West. Once again, one of these marquee matchups on Saturday's slate. The MLS After Dark is going to, on paper, looks like it's going to be very, very entertaining, and hopefully it plays out that way. Both these teams with 5 games remaining. The gap is 5 points right now for San Diego, and this is one that they can really solidify that one spot in the West if they can handle getting all 3 points here. And they've been doing just fine recently. Coming out of Leagues Cup, it's been 3 wins and 4, the only other result being a draw. And they've just been road warriors. It's now 4 straight road wins. They just beat LAFC. Also beat San Jose. They've just been also just... I don't think they've lost a single match against all their LA opposition, the 3 other teams. All season long, Dreyer has been in MVP form. He's surely one of the top front runners at the moment. And the last time these 2 teams played, San Diego won on the road 4-2 in a match where I believe San Diego was impacted by a previous international break, if I'm not mistaken, and they still found a way to get the business done. So the Loons, of course, I mean, once again, we know tactically what this will be, but it's about, can the Loons adjust and be more clinical, be more efficient and comfortable in, just playing to their strengths on the road against San Diego that is, of course, going to possess the ball a lot. And they lost Oluwuche, which I've seen kind of split opinions on whether that helps or hurts this team, and I just don't know how you can say it, 100% with certainty that it helps this team. I just don't see that whatsoever. I mean, that is a clinical striker. I know Hlongwane can be a striker / wingback and play either, but I think that's a good problem to have as far as playing Yeboah and Oluwuche together. Now you just have Yeboah. You put a lot of pressure on him. Yes, he's delivered a lot in the season and a half he's been here, but I mean, there's so many question marks surrounding who's a true contender at the moment or not. I think Minnesota as a squad is very, very deep and competitive and is going to live and die by its tactics, but I think there's so many storylines going on as to how these teams are changing just ahead of the playoffs. And, it's just so much to keep up with that you even though teams are in the seeds they are in right now, so much can happen in the playoffs. But I guess I'm looking a little bit too far ahead. But this matchup can deliver in every which way. But I think San Diego will get the job done. I think just on the attacking side of things, they've really, really been clinical. They've cleaned some things up defensively. I mean, it's now 2 clean sheets in the last 4, despite, all that youth they've been playing. But McNair's come back, so he's been paired with McVay. And just a bit more continuity. And as long as they can keep getting goals from these wingers, I mean, who cares about a number 9? Who cares who's playing in that 9 role, in the false 9 role? If Ingvartsen, can barely stay healthy for 2 weeks when they're getting this type of production out of the entire team, it's really been a team effort. So I think San Diego widens this gap. I don't think they lose. I could see a tie, but I think these 2 play styles just one's going to prevail. I don't think it's going to be a neck and neck game in the sense of the scoreline. I think one's going to truly prevail as far as the play style goes, and one's going to put their stamp on this game and not look back. And I think that's going to be San Diego, and I think that they solidify that first place in the West, and then we'll see about who between them, Union, and potentially Miami, because of how many games they have left remaining, if they can climb back, and who gets this supporter shield.